So I'm hitting record now just so I don't forget halfway through the conversation because I have ADHD. So I always hit that first.
Sounds like a good plan.
It's a good plan. You know, looking at that 30 minutes in and seeing that it's not recording, it's not a good feeling.
Well, so let me paraphrase what we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those moments, and they're like, why? I'm like, just roll with it. Just go with it. What's going on, everyone? Josh White here, and thank you for tuning in to this incredibly special episode. Yes, General Slife. I was able to sit down with Lt General Jim Slife and have a candid and transparent conversation with this uniquely positioned leader. You know, not many conversations get me nervous, but when I'm sitting across from a 3-star general, it hits different. But I have to say, General Slife put me at ease right away. He was incredibly easy to talk to, very insightful, transparent, and overall it was just a great discussion. So I want to thank Major Kate Hewlett for helping set this special discussion up. And I also want to give a tremendous thank you to General Slife for giving me an hour of his time, for giving us an hour of his time to have a candid discussion with such a uniquely positioned leader, a 3-star general in today's Air Force. Lt General James Slife serves as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, Headquarters U.S. Air Force, Arlington, Virginia. He leads the development and implementation of policy, directly supporting global operations, force management, training, and readiness for the Air Force, and serves as the Air Force Operations Deputy to the Air Force Chief of Staff. Lt General Slife was born outside of Detroit and grew up in Hot Springs, Arkansas. He was commissioned through the ROTC program at Auburn University and has spent the majority of his career in special operations aviation assignments, deploying extensively. Prior to his current assignment, Lt General Slife was the commander, Air Force Special Operations Command, Hurlburt Field, Florida. During my talk with General Slife, we discuss his views on command teams and his special relationship with his chief. A more lighthearted story about his uniform being left behind before a momentous change of command, his favorite leadership book, and his proudest Air Force moment. We also talk about his purpose, his why. We talk about his thoughts after 9/11 and how he felt, his time working in special operations and how those experiences shaped him as a leader. We don't shy away from the tough topics either. We talk about mental resiliency, especially after combat experience. How do you keep your team motivated through those tough times? How does one deal with invisible wounds? As a general, his schedule is packed to the brim, so we talk about family, work, and self-care. I ask him, how does he manage to keep it all together while having such a tremendous work responsibility and constantly moving around with a wife and 4 children? And lastly, we talk about where he hopes to see the Air Force go by 2030. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to this very special episode. I hope you have a fantastic day. Let's get after it. Lt General Jim Slife, and for those who are listening who's like, hey, what's a lieutenant general? That's a 3-star general, right? And sir, I don't know if I've ever even spoken to a 3-star general before. I think you might be the first one.
What a privilege that is. You know, I have been searching for meaning my whole life, and here we have it.
We have it.
The opportunity to sit down and spend a little time together, Josh.
Absolutely, and I'm so honored that you would do that. Seriously, it's such a blessing and such an honor for you to spend time with me today. And today's a big day. It's a day of celebration today, right? Because we're going to celebrate Command Chief Corey Olson's retirement today. That's what brings you here today, correct?
Absolutely. Chief Olson and I were a command team here at AFSOC for about 3.5 years, and you know, I was reflecting on our time together, and it was a fairly momentous 3.5 years. Now, I'm sure everybody would say that about whatever moment in time they're in, but I think objectively, you know, when you look at things like COVID and the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the social unrest around the 2020 election, I mean, there is a lot going on during that 3.5 years. And as I was kind of thinking back on it, every image that I have as I think about the key moments for that 3.5 years. Chief Olson is front and center in every one of those images, whether it's him and me in the commander's office working through some issue, or we're in a conference room listening to some, great analysis by the staff. Whatever it was that, was consequential for my 3.5 years as the AFSOC commander, Chief Olson was kind of front and center in all that. So, I asked him twice to extend his retirement, and he did. So it'll be 32 years as
Wow.
we retire him today. It's pretty impressive.
That's so rare, too.
It sure is.
I can barely find other senior NCOs sometimes, and I've been in almost 19 years now. That's only like about half of what, someone like Chief Olson is at. I can't even imagine that.
He's been a chief for 13 years. I mean, you think about that. He's been a chief for 13 years. As you know, Josh, the law only allows 1% of the enlisted force to be a chief at any given time. So it's constrained by the law that we have. And so, when you think about somebody that's been a chief for 13 years and, is getting ready to retire at 32, I can't help but think that all over the Air Force, there are probably senior master sergeants going, thank God, get the heck out of the way. So it'd be fun today to retire Chief Olson.
All the seniors in the audience will be like, yes, finally.
So you're saying there's a chance.
They're saying there's a chance. That 1% is mine. No, I appreciate that. And so I don't know if you've listened to any episodes in the past, but what I do is I start off with 3 random questions called the Hero's Gauntlet. They're not my questions. They're Major Kate Hewlett's questions. Now, why do I bring her up? Because she's what made today possible. I've never met anyone like her. She's absolutely incredible.
She is.
So, she's been the missing piece of my life for many years, and I'm so blessed that, I've ran into her.
Yeah, Kate is like a proton. She's just a positively charged particle that can't ever be made into a negative particle. She's just going to bounce around and make everything about her positive.
I love that.
It's great to serve with her.
Absolutely. So these are her questions. Now, the first one, we kind of touched on it a little bit.
Can we just clarify for the audience that I have absolutely no idea what these questions are?
That is correct. No one ever knows what the Hero's Gauntlet questions are.
Okay. So
it's clarified.
Fire for effect.
Okay, so what are your views on command teams, and how does that tie into reflecting on your relationship with Chief Olson? What did y'all get right?
Yeah, so I think the key is in the word team, and the role of the senior enlisted leader is really interesting because there is no inherent authority in the role of being a command chief. There's not a law, there's not an AFI that says, here are all the resources you get, here are all the authorities you get. All of that flows from the commander. And so how that relationship goes is very dependent on, the personalities involved, but it's also dependent on, what the commander's approach to the role is. And for me, I've seen command teams that do it a lot of different ways. One of the ways that I've seen people do it is kind of the divide and conquer approach, where the commander and the command chief are doing 2 different things, and they periodically intersect and give each other a rundown of here's what I've been up to, and then they bounce off and do 2 different things. That's not really the approach that I've enjoyed the most success with over the years. To me, the command chief can be enormously influential and enormously productive for the command if everybody understands that the command chief is completely empowered by the commander. And they can't do that if they're not present in the conversations, if they're not part of the consequential decisions. One of the things that Chief Olson and I have talked about plenty of times is that there aren't any enlisted issues in the Air Force. There are just Air Force issues, and all Air Force issues deserve to have a commander and a command chief, looking at them together, as opposed to, hey, I'll handle the commander decisions and you handle all the enlisted decisions. That's not a winning combination. And so, when I think about the time that I spent with Chief Olson, it was, we were always together for all the consequential decisions. I never, I didn't make a military justice decision without getting his counsel. I didn't make a budget decision without getting his counsel. I mean, there was nothing that I did for those 3.5 years that he wasn't right in the middle of. And so to me, when you ask what is the command team, people can do it a lot of different ways, but that is my preference, is to have it be an actual team. And Chief Olson is the most personable human being I think I've probably ever met. I mean, he could make friends, with a tree, and get the life story of the tree in the first 15 minutes, because he's just that approachable and personable and that stuff. And I think part of the relationship that he and I had is, that's not me, and I wish it was. I'm envious of how easy he is around other people. I'm not that way. And so, in many ways, I think we complemented each other well, and we really were.
And I think that's the best teams.
Yeah, that's right.
When there's two kind of almost opposites, which could clash, right? It could go wrong. But if those two opposites lean on each other's strengths,
yeah, I
mean, that's when amazing things happen. So I'm so glad you found that teammate.
I did, and I think it comes down to respect. There is nobody that I respect more highly than Chief Olson. I mean, he's pure integrity. Every piece of counsel he ever gave me, you could be sure it was coming from a place of integrity and, at the heart of our core values. There was never a selfish piece of advice that he offered. So, yeah, just a fantastic relationship.
And we're gonna see him out today.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, sir. So here is the second question, and that's if you're willing to share the story about the time your uniform was left behind and how your team supported you to make it happen.
Well, yeah, that's my uniform was left behind. That's so in grammar, or we call that passive voice because it hides the doer, right? The
Right.
uniform was left behind by, we don't know.
Right.
But the answer to that is by me. And so, so the story is that we're here at Hurlburt. I officiated a change of command in the morning. It's summertime. It's 150 degrees or whatever. And so as soon as the ceremony's over, I ditched the service dress jacket and, put on the windbreaker and went on about the rest of my day. And so that evening, we're going to hop on a airplane to head out to Cannon in eastern New Mexico. The next morning is the wing change of command at Cannon. So we're, eastern New Mexico, 8 in the morning, wing change of command. And so we off we go. We get to Cannon. It's probably 7:30 at night. And of course, in Clovis, New Mexico, the sidewalks roll up at probably 6 o'clock in the evening. So I mean, there's nothing open except a few restaurants and that stuff. And so I'm checking into the billeting room and unpacking my stuff. I'm like, where is my jacket? Where's my service dress jacket? And
Never a good feeling.
Not a good feeling. And so I called my aide. And I'm like, hey, where's my service dress jacket? And she's like, well, I don't know, sir. Where did you leave your service dress jacket? I'm like, well, thanks, that's helpful. And so as I start kind of rewinding, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I left it in the back of my car from when I took it off after the thing in the morning. So here's the situation. It's 7:30 at night in Clovis, New Mexico. There's a change of command at 8 o'clock in the morning, with 2,000 people in the, hangar, civic leaders, all that. And I don't have a service dress jacket. And so I call Chief Olson. I'm like, Chief, I think I'm hosed here, man. I left my jacket behind. Do we do the change of command in our shirt sleeves? What do we do? And Chief Olson's like, negative, sir. We've got this. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, and so it's Clovis, New Mexico, and I'm short of service dress. So, yeah, what could possibly go wrong? So, so Chief Olson gets finds the thrift shop president, who happens to be the MSG superintendent's spouse, gets the keys to the thrift shop. And so we go start, browsing through the thrift shop, and lo and behold, we find a service dress jacket that fits me that, somebody has donated to the thrift shop. And I'm like, great,
Wow.
I can borrow this. So I take the jacket. They called in the AFES clothing sales manager, who comes in and opens the clothing sales store. So, all right, now we're getting close. I got a jacket, I got some USs, I've got, a smattering of ribbons, which I'm pretty sure I'm authorized to wear. I've got a set of pilot wings. I mean, I'm getting close, but I don't have any stars, and I don't have a name tag that says Slife. But I mean, they don't.
But, right, to have your name,
yeah,
it would have to have been someone who never picked up their name tag that just happened to be your name.
That's right. And Slife, as it turns out, is not a common name in the clothing sales line of work. So, and neither are apparently stars in Clovis, New Mexico. So they got no stars, and I
Right.
got no name tag. And so, like, okay, getting a little closer here. So the aide calls the New Mexico National Guard Adjutant General, who's a Army 2-star, who's going to be coming in the next morning for the change of command. She was like, hey, sir, you got any extra stars you can bring? Can you bring 6 stars that we can put on General Slife's uniform in the morning? Yeah, no problem. I got it. And so she calls me up. She's like, sir, great news. We got the stars. So now we're down to a name tag. So in the clothing sales, in the back, there is this box of unclaimed service dress name tags, and so we get a name tag that, somebody had ordered and never picked up. It's, Smithers or something. And we went to the 24-hour Walmart and found some aluminum duct tape and a blue Sharpie marker. And I put this duct tape over the name tag, and real neatly I wrote Slife on the silver with this Sharpie marker. And I'm telling you, Josh, you from beyond 5 feet, you couldn't actually tell that it was not an engraved U.S. Air Force name tag. And so, at 7:55 the next morning, the adjutant general shows up with these stars. We stuck them on the uniform, and I walked up on the stage like this hadn't been an all-night production trying to put a uniform together. So that's the story there.
Wow, and I know when you had all your uniform together and you were there for that change of command and it was going according to plan, and no one batted an eye, right? No one knew. I know in your head you were thinking, "Thank God."
Yeah,
thank God.
Between Chief Olson and the aide de camp, they bailed me out of that one. And we told the PA people, no photos, which include the name tag, because
Right.
You zoom in on that thing, you could
Right.
probably figure out that there was something amiss.
Gotcha. No, I think that's a testament to your team too. Like when you're an aide or someone's right-hand man or woman, you get very creative, right? You can make things happen very, very quick. Like you start to learn how to be resourceful.
Oh, you got that right.
And whenever that, because I was a Med Group Commander's exec, Colonel Crystal Henderson, and there was things that would go wrong, and my mind would go into problem-solving mode.
Yep.
I wouldn't panic. I would just say, we're going to fix this.
Yeah.
We just have to find a way how.
Yeah.
Right? So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of lessons that you can learn in those positions.
Do or do not. There is no try.
This one's kind of my question, and I think people would just want to know, what is your go-to leadership book? Everyone's always interested what our Air Force leaders are reading. Is there any particular book that you've just returned to and always remembered?
It has. It's probably evolved over the years. There were things that when I was a junior officer that I found to be really impactful, and then there were others that later in my career I thought were a little more impactful. And so I don't know that I have a go-to book, but I would say probably one of my all-time favorites. And it's one that that I sometimes give as going away gifts for people that have worked for me was a book called Once an Eagle by Anton Myrer. And it's an Army book. It's about two soldiers that kind of grew up on parallel paths from World War I all the way through the beginning of the Vietnam War. And it's fiction, but these two characters, Sam Damon and Courtney Massengale, are really set up as kind of almost the polar opposites of one another. And so Sam Damon is a soldier. He's always taking care of his men. He's, focused on the mission and taking care of the people around him. Courtney Massengale is portrayed as this very politically motivated, very self-serving, career staff officer that, is always trying to avoid damage to his career in order to get ahead and so forth. And so it's a really well-told story, but and it was written in the late 1960s, and so it's been around for over 50 years now. But the interesting thing to me is a lot of people read Once an Eagle and they view it as we should all want to be like Sam Damon and not like Courtney Massengale. And that's kind of the standard reading of the story is to be Sam Damon, don't be Courtney Massengale. And in fact, in the Army, a lot of times, among the worst put-downs you can say about somebody is to call them a Courtney Massengale.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's a real, that's a real put-down in the Army. And so, but I think that the fascinating thing is that they both have flaws. They're both very human. It's not black and white, and and I think you can learn from both of these characters. And I'm reminded of the story in the Bible when Jesus sends his disciples out. What he tells them is to be shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. And and I think that all of us have to be as shrewd as the Courtney Massengales, but we have to be as innocent as the Sam Damons. And so I think this is it's a really good story. It's a lot of book. It's close to 1,000 pages, I think. But
wow.
But it's a really, really good read.
That sounds incredible, and I love the parallels between the two characters you were outlining. And I feel like the more you read it, the more you kind of learn that there's good things about both. It's not all black and white. That's the bad guy, that's the good guy. A lesson I've learned that kind of ties into that is your reputation and your actual skill level are kind of two different fronts, right? They don't always match.
That's right.
You'd want them both to be good, but they're two different, approaches, right? And I learned that in Honor Guard when, we were in poor shape when I first got there, and I got one of the best trainers in the Air Force, Tech Sergeant Jeremy Rutherford, and he made us the best, but I still wasn't getting support from the base because it was a bad reputation. And I thought, dang, I know we're the best, I know we're sharp, but now there's this other battle on convincing everyone of that truth.
Yeah.
So that's when I learned that there's two different fronts, and that's kind of what those two characters remind me of. One was actually the best, and maybe not a lot of people know that. And then there's this other guy who everyone knows who might not actually be the best. You do have one bonus question, though.
Okay.
What is your proudest Air Force moment?
There's a lot of ways to answer that, Josh. Of course, there's a selfish way to answer that. The personal thing that you're proudest of. But then there's probably the bigger stuff that goes beyond the person. When you look at the kind of acceptance of SOF officers and NCOs as part of the United States Air Force and not just this niche thing that kind of happens off, as a side act in the Air Force, over the last several years, that is something that I really am happy to see. So I could cite a whole host of senior officers with soft backgrounds that are doing impactful work for the United States Air Force. Chief Olson is the best builder of people that I've ever served with, and so the generations of senior NCOs that he has personally developed and helped put into positions of influence and leadership around the entire Air Force. I mean, it really is great because, when I came to SOF, my first squadron was full of passed over captains and majors. I mean, nobody could get promoted inside of SOF. And as recently as, when I became a one-star, I had a senior officer, that essentially told me, we don't know what to do with soft generals because you're too narrow. You're not really broad enough to do big Air Force leadership roles. And so, we're kind of stuck when we make a soft general. And I look at the way that has changed over the last decade or so, and it certainly wasn't, solely me or solely Chief Olson, but he and I put a lot of work into that. And to watch people succeed at high levels across the Air Force doing things that are impactful for the United States Air Force is really gratifying. Because, as much as I have enjoyed all of my time in SOCOM and all of my time in the special ops community, the reality is that 35 years ago I joined the United States Air Force, and to be in a position to be recognized as an Air Force leader and not just a niche soft leader is something that I am really proud of. I mean, I think we have something to live up to there, and so I'm really proud of the work that, in particular, Chief Olson has done, kind of populating the Air Force with really, really high-quality senior NCOs.
Leaders creating leaders.
That's right. What General Creech used to say is the first job of a leader is to create more leaders. As a brand new colonel, I was on my way to War College, which, of course, is the top-level PME for officers, and I was going to school in Washington, and I got a phone call right before I left from the Colonel's Group. These are the people that do Colonel's assignments for the Air Force. And the Colonel's Group called me and they said, "Hey, Colonel Slife, we've got great news for you." And this was before that I knew when the Colonel's assignments people tell you, "We have great news for you," what they really mean is, "We have bad news for you." But, so I'm like, "Oh, well, that's good."
So you have that blind optimism, yeah. Fantastic, let's hear it.
That's right, yeah, break out the good news. And they said, "Well, in lieu of going to War College, you've been selected to be a Secretary of Defense Corporate Fellow." And I said, "Okay, that's interesting. What is that?" And they said, "Well, instead of going to War College, we take, few colonels from each service every year and send them to a Fortune 500 company, and you spend a year in a Fortune 500 company learning how the corporate world does business, and then you bring that knowledge back to the Air Force." And
that's pretty unique.
Yeah, and I said, "Well, that sounds pretty cool. Where am I going?" And they said, "You're going to Microsoft." And so I spent a year at Microsoft as a brand new colonel.
Wow.
This was 2006 that I went off to Microsoft. And it was a fascinating year, but one of the, I could talk about that for a long time, but one of the real ahas to your point about leaders creating leaders, one of the ahas in that experience for me is, at Microsoft or any company, if you wake up one day and you don't have somebody prepared to, become the vice president of whatever, you can go to Google or Oracle or Apple or GE and hire one of their people to come be your vice president. But in the military, it doesn't really work that way.
Right. That's a really good point.
There's only one place Air Force Chief Master Sergeants come from. Air Force Senior Master Sergeants.
Absolutely.
And there's only one place Senior Master Sergeants come from, Air Force Master Sergeants. And so
there's that legacy, that building, that passing of the torch. It's monumental for us.
It really is. And when you think about it, so the consequence of that is that we have to build our own. I mean, we can't take our eye off the ball of developing people and hope that, well, somebody else will figure it out. Because if we don't do it, it just doesn't get done, right? And so for us, I really do believe that the first job of a leader is to create more leaders, because that is the future of the Air Force. And frankly, when you look around and how often do you hear people on their way out the door, and I bet you Chief Olson will say it today at his retirement ceremony. He will say something like, how much better airmen are today than when he came in the Air Force. And I think that's actually true. And the reason it's true is because people keep investing more in people. And, so the airmen today really are better than the airmen of 32 years ago.
It's like the investment of mentorship has built momentum.
Yeah, it's a compounding effect, like your investment program. Pretty soon the investment is making money off of itself without you having to put anything into it. And so it's this compounding effect of developing leaders and mentoring people. And, that was a real aha moment for me at Microsoft. And it, when you're around somebody like Chief Olson that is forever investing in people, it really is inspiring.
That is inspiring. And that's why I treat legacy with such respect, because it's rare. It's rare to see, and we're blessed to be able to see it firsthand. So a little bit about you and your purpose and your why.
Yeah, so been married for over 30 years, got 4 grown kids, grew up in Hot Springs, Arkansas, went to school at Auburn, and it was I don't think my story is particularly unique. For me, it was a very transactional relationship with the Air Force at first. I couldn't afford to go to college. I had to find a way to fund it myself. And the Air Force said, "Hey, we'll pay for your college, but you need to give us 4 years in return." And so it was this, it was a transaction, right? And once I started, I go, well, this isn't too bad. Maybe I could do a little more than 4 years. And pretty soon, I kind of came to this conclusion that, I'm doing stuff that matters with people that I respect. Why would I leave? And so I'm now, 34 years into that 4-year commitment.
Wow.
And I don't think that's a unique story. I think people find their passion and their purpose when they're doing things that matter as part of high-performing teams with people that they have enormous personal respect for. And, that's where I've been for 34 years. And so I can't really envision anything else. To the question about, the passion and what motivates me, one of the things that's always surprised me is seeing senior leaders that leave, retire, or whatever, disappointed or frustrated. They're angry that they didn't get one more job or one more promotion or one more whatever. And I had this, kind of aha, kind of early in my career, where I realized that, if you define success in your career by rank or position, what you're doing is you're essentially giving somebody else the decision about whether you have been successful or not in the end. Because, I didn't promote myself. The Air Force did a board and they decided to promote me. I didn't hire myself into any job. The Air Force hired me into all these jobs. And so the institution is the one that makes those decisions. And I don't really want to be in a position where the institution tells me whether or not I've been successful. I want to be able to control whether or not I'm successful. And so I've thought a lot about, so what is the definition of success? What does it mean? And to me, as I've thought about it, I think that the definition of success to me is found in the fingerprints that you leave on people. Because
Absolutely.
that's what people remember. 10 years from now, people aren't going to remember that I knew how to execute a flying hour program, or I could, write good OPRs or EPRs or whatever. I mean, people don't remember the things. They remember the investment that you made in them to help them succeed. And so that is actually something I can control. I can prioritize how much time I choose to invest in other people. And so to me, that's where I find the greatest gratification and satisfaction. And so when you ask, if somebody were to ask, what is, have I been successful, or what's the definition of success? To me, that's what it is. And I keep this picture on my wall in every office that I'm in, and it's Alice in Wonderland. And if you're familiar, if you remember the story of Alice in Wonderland, there's this scene where she's trying to find her way through Wonderland, and she's talking to the Cheshire cat up in the tree, and the cat's up there grinning, looking at her. And the conversation is, "Pardon me, Cheshire Puss, can you tell me which way I ought to go from here?" "Well," said the cat, "that depends a great deal on where you want to get to." "Well, I don't really care where," said Alice. "Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. And I keep that picture on my wall to remind me that everybody has a different definition of success. And, before you can give anybody any meaningful career advice, you probably ought to know what their definition of success is, right? So,
absolutely.
If you were to ask me, where should I go? What should I do? What assignment should I pursue, or whatever? I would start by asking you, where do you think you want to go? Because if you say, hey, I want to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force one day, I'd say, okay, go this direction. And if you were to say, I've got family here in Northwest Florida, and I, want to provide stability, and I never want a PCS, and this is where I need to stay, okay, let's stay here then, and, do this. If you say, I really want to become an officer and go to OTS, okay, go that way. All those are different paths. They're all fine paths.
Right.
But they're just based on different definitions of success. And
absolutely.
So, to me, that's investing in people and helping them get to whatever success looks like to them is the thing.
Absolutely. And you touched on something huge about, basically tell me how I should feel about me. That kind of mindset, right? Letting the organization, positions, titles, and rank define your happiness and fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And I'll be transparent, I got caught up in that. I was a tech sergeant going for master. My peers were making it. I wasn't. We get caught up in what we can see and touch, right? Like the tangible.
Yeah.
And then at some, my experience with Honor Guard, I learned that there's this whole other world of things that you can't quantify, of things that you can't touch or see, and that's your impact on people and the fulfillment that you get. And when I let all that go, I've still let that go. I dedicate all my time to what's around me and try to live in the moment at this point. But once I let that go, I made Master Sergeant.
Isn't that funny? I was telling somebody the other day, I'm in my 20th Air Force assignment right now. And as I go back and look at those 20 assignments, the funny thing is, 9 of them have been the assignment that I wanted or that I thought I should have. Which is another way of saying that over half of the times in my career, I have, gotten an assignment that I didn't want, that I didn't, and I mean, 11 times in my career I've had the writing's on the wall, they don't love me anymore, they're sending me a message, 11 times
that's tough.
But the reality is every one of those 20 assignments was the perfect assignment. I just didn't see it at the time. And, so there's a whole lot to be said for, not getting too wrapped up in that stuff and just doing the best you can in the moment wherever you are.
Absolutely.
And, these things tend to play out over time. And, in your case, you made master once you let go of the reins so tightly. And, in my case, I'm 34 years into a 4-year commitment, with over half the assignments were ones that I thought, the Air Force is telling me they don't love me anymore.
Right. But you're still here. You're still going.
Here I am.
Are there any memorable declassified moments participating in special operation assignments that you could share? And also, take it back a little bit, how did you feel after 9/11 and being thrust into the fight earlier than you thought?
When I think back at all the memorable missions, it's not actually the mission that I remember, it's the people that I was with. And, I've been on so many great teams over the years, and I think back at the NCOs that were building me, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I look back and I go, yeah, I've got the fingerprints of this tech sergeant and this master sergeant and this chief master sergeant. I've got NCO fingerprints all over me, and I didn't realize it at the time. But that's the thing that I remember is the people and the teams. It's not the details of any particular mission. I will say that there's nothing like coming back alive when you should be dead that really solidifies a great memory.
I'm sure that changed your perspective forever.
Yeah, it does. One particular mission, it was the first mission of Iraqi freedom, March 19th, 2003. And so I led the first mission that went across the border into Iraq.
Wow. And
there were 7 helicopters, and I was leading that formation. And it was an absolutely horrendous night of flying. And I mean, it was just one drama after another.
It was just a nightmare.
For 13 hours. And I mean, that's a story,
Right.
in and of itself. But I remember but the point of that is I remember the picture that I took with that crew that I flew with as soon as we got back and landed. I remember standing next to Thomas Lessner and John Tharp and Todd Bice and Aaron Bettison and Eric Gazelle and Brian Bell. Those are the people that I flew that mission with, and I've got that picture of us looking like, we had just been through the ringer. Wow. Standing out alive when there was plenty of times that night that I thought, yeah, we really have no business being alive right now.
Holy cow, that's incredible. And for you to be able to just say all those names just off the top of your head, even after all these years.
Yeah, it's been over 20 years now.
Those, when you go through something that you couldn't do on your own, and you're truly relying on the person to your left and right, and you can get through that as a team, that brings you together closer than anything else really ever could.
Yeah, you asked about 9/11. So on 9/11, I was a student at the School of Advanced Air Power Studies at Maxwell. So I was a major with a line number to lieutenant colonel. And I'd just been out for a run on Maxwell, and I came back into the fitness center at Maxwell, and so I'm in the lobby. I walked in the lobby, and there was a television, just about like that, a television hanging up kind of in the corner of the lobby. And we walked in and watched the airplane flying to the tower. Everybody was just kind of gathered around, just staring at the television. And I remember, standing there, kind of dripping sweat and that kind of stuff, watching this take place. And all I could think of was, dang it, I'm stuck here in school, and I knew that there was going to be action. And what I remember thinking was, I'm going to miss the war. I'm going to be stuck here at Maxwell, and I'm going to miss the war. And 8 months later, or whatever it was, 9-10 months later, I graduated and came to Hurlburt as an ops officer of one of the squadrons. And as it turns out, I did not miss the war in Afghanistan.
Yeah, you definitely you did not miss it.
Just like everybody else, I got to spend the next 20 years going back and forth, not missing the war.
Right. Yeah. When I saw 9/11, unfold, I was in 11th grade. I was in my science class, and my reality was shattered. Right. Well, for one, my dad worked at the Pentagon at that time, so that was terrifying. But I remember just not believing that was intentional.
You could have, maybe if it was foggy or something, but
right.
It was a clear, beautiful day,
and our teachers were like, "This is intentional." they were adults, they knew.
Yeah.
But me as a kid, I was like, there's no way that someone would do that. That's crazy. And then when I learned that it was intentional, and I learned what types of evil truly exist out there, that was eye-opening for me. And I knew I was on the fence about joining because I told you about my dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. So that was always on my mind. But then after that, I was like, that's it. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you did too. I think mental health awareness, being strong mentally, socially, physically, spiritually is so important, today more than ever. And for someone who's seen combat experience, or have a team go through combat experience, I would assume it's really hard to stay motivated, positive about the situation. And then there might be invisible wounds afterwards, right? So I was hoping to get your insight and thoughts, importance of mental health, and your thoughts on invisible wounds.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. One is, when we go to combat, we oftentimes talk about higher ideals, like, we're fighting for democracy or, for liberty or, whatever. But the reality is that in combat, everybody is fighting for the person next to them. They're fighting for their teammates. It's they're in a difficult position. They're facing challenges that they don't know that they can overcome. And it's the fear of letting your teammate down that is the thing that motivates. I don't ever want to let down somebody that, their life depends on me and my life depends on them.
That's like a true servant leader. You would, someone like me who doesn't know anything about that lifestyle, I would say, oh, you don't want something to happen to you. But the reality is they're more concerned with their brothers and sisters around them.
That's exactly right.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. And so, but those experiences can leave us damaged. There are things I think fall into the category of invisible wounds that I carry around. And I think most people that have, regardless of what your experience is, how violent or graphic or, life-threatening it was, I think many people do carry around some degree of invisible wounds. I certainly do. And I think, on that topic, we use that term, invisible wounds, and I think sometimes we don't do a good enough job at characterizing what exactly we're talking about when we use the term invisible wounds. And what I think, Josh, is that there are really three kinds of wounds that fall into this category, and they are, in many ways, they manifest similarly. And so, it's hard to diagnose exactly why are we seeing this behavior, whether it's, can't sleep at night, whether it's, having nightmares, whether it's anxiety, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's thoughts of self-harm. I mean, these are all ways that these invisible wounds manifest, but I don't think you can effectively treat the wound itself unless you understand what is the wound. And I think there are three very different types of invisible wounds. The first one is neurocognitive injury. And so neurocognitive injury is brain damage. It's traumatic blast injury. It is, I was in a MRAP that got blown up by a IED and, it rattled my brain, or I was on an AC-130 gunship that was firing 105 rounds, every night, and I was standing next to the barrel as this thing, went off over and over again. EOD technician, and was blowing up unexploded ordnance and that kind of stuff. So, I think this neurocognitive injury, brain damage, I think people understand what that is and can kind of get their minds around what that looks like. But it manifests in some of those ways. The second one is psychological injury. And psychological injury, again, manifests in many of the same ways, but comes from a very different place. It is experiencing, seeing something traumatic, that the human shouldn't really have to experience. It is, my teammate being shot, and I had to, listen to him as he died next to me. It is watching somebody get blown up. It's these very violent, traumatic things that we might go through that leave us psychologically wounded, because humans shouldn't have to experience that. It's not part of what we should do. Post-traumatic stress, PTS, right? And so the post-traumatic event, and this could be, it could be a combat-related thing. It doesn't have to be combat-related. It's just some trauma that you experience in your life can leave these invisible wounds behind. So that's psychological injury. The third invisible wound is what many people describe as moral injury. And moral injury is when we do something or tolerate something that doesn't align with our personal moral system. And it is doing something that I thought was the right thing at the time, or it felt like it was justified when I did it, but when I look back, I realize I shouldn't have done that, and I should have done something about that, but I stood there and let it happen. And we have this guilt from what we should have done, or what we shouldn't have done, that is caused by taking some action that doesn't align with our own value system. And so, the moral injury, psychological injury, neurocognitive injury, I think those things are all different types of invisible wounds that really can leave similar marks, but I think the treatment is probably very, very different for those.
Absolutely. No, I haven't heard it just outlined that way, right? It's always wrapped up in one word, one topic. Mm-hmm. So to hear it broken out like that, it would have to have a different approach of healing for each one.
That's right.
As we come to the end of our talk here, as a master sergeant, my family gives me so much purpose, right? My two kids, I have a 5-year-old daughter, 3-year-old son. We're having a blast together. I'm living a life I've only dreamt of. Didn't think it was possible. And I don't want to lose that, obviously, right? Or my dad and my mom both went through multiple traumatic divorces, and I saw, I felt that, and I saw what it did to them. And my dad was an airman too, so, I feel like I'm entering that stage in my life where now more than ever I need to prioritize my life and where I put my time and energy. And I struggle with that. I'm just being transparent. I do struggle with that, and I do goof that up sometimes. And so as a master sergeant, I can't imagine how a 3-star, all the moves, you got twice as many kids as me, you got all these, you're moving around, you're traveling, you're deploying. Your time is divided so much that I was hoping, from someone like me who wants to keep my family intact but also have a good career and take care of myself, if you had any insight at your level as to how you think that could be managed more efficiently.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 thoughts on that. I'll give you two thoughts. The first is, a lot of people talk about work-life balance, right? And the idea of balance is, there are 2 things that are in some kind of tension, right? Like it's either this or this, and I have to find a balance between this or that, right? And it was my wife that taught me that it's not so much about work-life balance, it's about work-life integration. It's about blending these components of our life together in a harmonious way. It's not about having to make a choice between one or the other. It's about, doing it all together. And that has been really useful to me. The second thing that I would offer you, and particularly as a senior NCO, is, I struggled for a long time with the idea that I was going to come in a little later in the morning or go home a little earlier in the evening, because I felt like, I was cheating in some way, that I was taking a shortcut. I wasn't working as hard as I needed to. And there was this guilt associated with, frankly, self-care, family care, and that kind of stuff. Like, hey, it's a service before self organization that we're in. And if I'm, not spending all my waking hours at the unit doing unit things, then I must not be putting service before self. And so I struggle with how to square that. And the big aha for me was, how often have we heard people, whether it's at NCO Academy or at, Command and Staff College or whatever, how often do we hear people tell you, hey, you really need to, take care of yourself and work-life balance and all that. And, what they're really telling you is, I didn't, but you should. Right?
Wow.
I didn't, but you should. One description of integrity might be making sure your audio and your video match.
Right.
Right? And so if I'm telling you to have balance, as a senior NCO, if you're telling airmen that you supervise, they need to have some balance, or they need to integrate their life, or they need to take care of themselves, or whatever. If you're telling them that, part of integrity is you better show them that.
Right, absolutely.
Right? I mean, you don't be the guy that says to do this, but then shows up at 6:30 every morning and stays till 8 o'clock at night and all that kind of stuff. And I had this aha once I kind of framed it as a core value issue, that hey, I got to demonstrate this as a leader. I've got to demonstrate self-care and taking time for fitness and taking time to eat dinner with my family and get my kids off to school in the morning, on the bus and that kind of stuff. I need to demonstrate that. It's integrity. Once I framed it as a core value thing, it was like I gave myself permission to do the thing that I wanted everybody to do.
Wow.
Right? And so, as leaders, you and I have to model the behavior that we would like to see in our subordinates. And so it's not just a matter of you taking care of yourself. It's a matter of you being a good leader and setting an example for the people you follow. And I'm sure that says something crappy about me, that I had to think of it as my duty to the Air Force as opposed to my duty to myself. I'm sure that there's something not good in that, but I really do view those as duties. I have a duty to set the example, because as we get into more senior positions, if you're going to be in at 6 a.m, guess what? There's somebody that feels like they got to be in at 5:45.
It's a unspoken message that you've put out.
And
right.
That's right. And there are people that are going to come in before you and people that are going to stay after you. As a general, if I'm going to come in at 7 a.m, you better believe there's going to be some major that feels like they got to be there at 6:30. And that major's got little kids at home. I don't have any kids at home anymore, but that major does. And now my behavior is driving them to having to come in at a unreasonable hour in the morning, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think a key part of this as leaders is to demonstrate the behavior that we're asking people to show.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of Senior Master Sergeant retired Misty Marino, who was that person, first in, last to leave, just putting her heart and soul into that. And one day she had a talk with her airmen about what they want to do with their future, and they all wanted to get out after their 4 to 6 year contract. And she's like, why do all y'all want to do that? And they said, all due respect, man, we don't want to be like you. And
that's right.
That was the moment where she was like, oh my goodness, this, I've been putting this message out to everyone, and she's having the opposite effect that she was going for.
That's right.
So I never forgot,
I mean, I can look back at plenty of times that I did not set the example that I wanted to set. But, I can't change that. I can change today. And so I will try and set a good example today, despite the fact that, maybe I didn't do this for my whole career, but I can start today.
That's learning. Today's a new day.
That's right.
We hear 2030 Airmen a lot. We need to have the 2030 Airmen ready. So I was hoping you could kind of give your final thoughts and include the vision of the 2030 Airmen and why that's important.
Well, so I don't know what the 2030 Airman is going to look like. But what I know is that whoever that 2030 Airman is, it's some kid in middle school right now, whoever that is, the Air Force that they're going to join is being built today. Right?
Absolutely.
The Air Force that some airman is going to join is being built today, because institutional change takes years. And so it's, I will not be in the Air Force in 2030, but the Air Force of 2030 will still contain my fingerprints, things that I worked on in 2023, decisions that I made, organizations that I set down a certain path. Those things will define the experience of that middle school kid that is going to join the Air Force in 2030. And so, I think every action that we take, we have to be thinking about that middle school kid. And what experience do I want them to have? Well, I want them to join an organization that is relevant. I want them to join an organization that is contributing to the national defense, that's indispensable to our nation, that's respected by the citizens that we serve and protect. I think, that's the kind of stuff that defines the Air Force that I want those middle school kids to walk into. And, they'll show up, in 2030, and, they won't walk into the Air Force and go, wow, this is a great Air Force. Thank God for General Slife. I'll be an anonymous has-been by then, but that's okay, because I'm going to get a lot of satisfaction out of watching the Airmen of 2030 be enormously successful because of some of the things that we're doing today.
Wow, that's beautifully said. Thank you so much, sir. So we had an amazing episode. And from you, from a three-star general, to sit down with me and have this talk, I can't thank you enough. I think you're an incredible person, an incredible leader. Just everything about you put me at ease, and I'm just so motivated and excited to get this episode out to everybody, because it's such a special insight that you've given us today. So I wanted to thank you, sir, from the bottom of my heart for spending time with me today.
Well, I'm glad to have had the opportunity to do it. A lot of fun. Probably won't come as a surprise to you. I don't do a lot of podcasts. This is a different format and a venue for me. You make it easy. You're a real professional, Josh, and you've got a great reputation. And so when I had the opportunity to join you for a conversation today, there was no way I was going to say no. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to sit down and talk to you.
And this was the hero's journey of Lt. General Jim Slife, and we're out. Wow, what an incredible episode. Lt. General Jim Slife dropping so much knowledge on us. I just rewatched the whole episode myself, and I am yet again blown away by his insight. I want to give a special shout out to Major Kate Hewlett for setting this conversation up, and of course, I want to give a special shout out to Lt. General Jim Slife on spending time with the Hero Front family. I also want to thank everyone for listening until the very end, and for all the support that you have shown me and the Hero Front podcast. And with that, my daughter is going to close us out.
Thanks for watching my dad's video. This was the Hero Front podcast. I hope you have a magical day. Bye-bye now.
So here's the topics that I've outlined. I have a little bit of background on you, if you want to highlight some of how you came to be, which that's probably a very long story, so I'll let you decide how you want to wordsmith that.
I think you just told me I was old.
I'm not telling you you're old. I just know you've done a lot of things. You've done all the things.